In this lesson, we are going to see how to take an input from the user. But what is an input? So input is a way of asking a user to enter some value so that user can interact with a script or a software. Now, how do I do that? So the syntax for taking an input from the user is creating a variable or using an existing variable, then assigning the value given by the input function. So the input function is what asks user to enter some value, and then once the user has entered a value, it will take that value and give it to a variable on the left side of the equal to symbol. Now let's see the sample program for this. Let's write a small program which will give us a demo of how to take an input from the user and print that value. Okay, so for that, in a file, let's write a small message, enter a number. Okay, and then we will have number equal to input function call. So this input function is asking user to enter some value. Then we are going to enter the number in a print statement. So we are hoping that the user, when the user enters his number, we are going to print the same number. Now let's see whether it works perfectly or not. Python space simple input.py. Now it is asking us to enter a number. Let's say I enter 12, press enter. See, the number is properly printed. I gave 12 as a number and it has printed the number. But here if you see, we have one small issue. The issue is we ask user to enter a number and it was waiting on the next line for us to enter the number, which is quite strange because this might confuse user what he or she has to do. So better way would be to have the number to be entered on the same line where print statement is. So let's see how to do that. So here if you see, we have a print statement where we have a message enter a number. And as we know, as soon as the print statement is done with printing this number, this value, it will go on to the next line. If we do not want print to go on to the next line, there is one parameter for a print function which asks us to put the end value, by default end value, which is by default considered as a new line, which is /n. So now we are going to change it to space, and let's see how it works. So now let's run our program again. See, now the input function is waiting for us to enter some value on the same line where print statement has printed the message. So let's enter 12 again, and it has taken the input, gave that value to a variable number, and then we are able to print the number term. Okay. Now let's see the other way of putting a message on the same line where we are asking user to enter a value. So in this example, we saw how to use a print and its parameter end to print a message and then wait on the same line for the user to enter a value. Now, in this example, we are going to ask a user a prompt for entering the same value. So let's do that. Number equal to input, enter a number, and print number. Now let's execute this program first, and then later on I will explain you the difference. Let's run the program. Python prompt user.py. See, the behavior is similar to what we saw in the previous example, which is simple input.py file. In this, let's enter the same number. See, the output is also same. So that input has given a message, enter a number, and once the user enters a number, it will read that value and print it. Okay. Now let's see the difference between the two programs. Now in this program, I used an input function which is similar to what we saw in this example, with the only difference is in this example, input function is not having any value passed to it, whereas in the prompt user program, we passed the string or a message which should be displayed to the user as enter a number, and the message is exactly same that we put over here in the print statement. So what have we done differently over here? So the difference is that we ask user to enter a number directly by providing it to the input function, and input function gives a prompt to the user. So the difference is just that we have reduced one line of code, which is a print statement, and with using the input function we are able to actually ask a user, or we are able to prompt user to enter a value. Now let's see the example where we ask user to enter multiple values. Okay, so let's say we ask user to enter a number first, enter first number, then number underscore 2 equal to input, enter second number, and then we are going to perform the addition on these two, number plus number 2, print addition of, and as we have seen we are going to use the f string number number 2 is, let's see we are able to perform the addition operation on this or not. Let's run our program, multiple prompts. So let's enter first number as 1, second number as 2, and it has printed our output is the addition of 1 and 2 is 12. Oh, the output we were expecting is 3, but instead we got 12. Why? Let's see that. In the program, we asked user to enter two values, and we gave those two values to number and number 2, and then we performed the addition operation, which we already tried in the previous lesson with the print statement, and everything that we did is exactly same, with the only difference is last time when we performed the addition operation we never used input, we gave the values to a variable and directly used them. So at that time when we gave a value to the variables were initialized with one integer. Now because of that, the number plus number 2 treated this line as a mathematical expression, and since both number and number 2 are integers, it performed the mathematical operation. But here something else is happening. If you see here, whenever you are entering some value, you are giving that value as a number to the input, but input is somehow not able to treat it as an integer. But let's verify that. So let's say I print, we will use a type function which we saw of number, and let's see the same thing for type of number 2. So let's run our program. Python multiple prompts of py. So first number, let's say we again enter 1. Oh, so the type of number variable is str. Second number is again str. And as we already know that when we use two strings and use plus operator, it is performing concatenation, and it is exactly taking those two strings as it is and literally joining them together. And that is what is happening over here. It took 1 and 2 and joined them together, and hence we see it as 12. But why is it the type is str even though we entered a number? So the reason being, whenever a user enters a value, it is always treated as a string. Hence, whether you are using a terminal or you are using some form on the website, the values that you provide will be treated as a string and not as a number or some other data type. And hence the result. So that means we need to convert our numbers into an integer. So let's do that. So let's comment these two lines because we don't need them. And here you can say int int. Now let's see the output. Python multiple prompts of py. Enter first number 1, second number 2. Yes. So our result is now correct. Each number we converted into an integer and then we use them in the addition operation. So interpreter by default evaluated number and number 2 variables as the integers and then perform the addition. Now let's slightly change our program. So instead of putting these ints over here, we just try to, let's say, make the entire thing as an integer, and let's see whether the output is 3 or not. Python multiple prompts.py, enter first number, second. This time it is again 12. Now why is it? So here you can see the number and number 2 are the string variables, and as per the precedence, the operation within the parenthesis will be called first, and then its result will be given as a parameter to the int function. And hence, interpreter saw both number and number 2 as the strings, and hence it has performed the concatenation and then gave those values as an input or a parameter to the int function, which transform that number into an integer value, and hence we are not able to get the desired output. So we need to make sure that we convert each number into an integer. Now let's try to execute it again. Input py, first number, second, and yes. So it is now working perfectly fine. Okay. So in this example, we saw how to take an input from the user, convert it into a desired type, and then use it in the processing or the operations. But can we take an input and before giving it to a variable, convert it into a desired type of data? So let's see that program. So here we are going to create a variable number equal to int input, and let's give a message, enter a number. Let's print its type. And let's run this part first. Python multiple prompt underscore conversion.py. So enter first number, let's say 1, and yes, its type is integer. That means as soon as we took the input from the user, we are able to convert that into the desired type of data, which is right now an integer. So let's do this further. So since we are able to convert the input value into an integer immediately, let's change this. So let me first come to this number underscore 2 equal to int into input to that enter a second number, and then we are going to say result equal to number plus number 2, then print result. Let's run this program. So Python multiple prompt conversion. So the first number is 1, second is 2, and yes, the output is 3. So that means we are successfully able to convert both the numbers at the time of taking an input from the user from string to integer and then use them in our operation. Now let's see whether we are able to get the multiple value via single input or not. So let's say I say number comma number underscore 2 equal to input enter two values, and then we are going to print each one number print number 2. Python single prompt inputs.py and press enter. So let's say I enter 212. Oh, what just happened? I was expecting input to accept two values. I entered only 1, 12. And though the program worked as soon as I pressed enter, but that entire number got divided into 1 and 2. So 1 is given to number and 2 is given to number 2. Now why is it happening? Because when we have multiple values onto the left side of the equal to symbol, input will try to convert each character and use that as a value to the variables. So if we by mistake provide more than the number of variables available onto the left side, we might get an error. So let's try that. So let's run the same example. This time I'm going to give 1, 2, 3. See, it says value error, too many values to unpack, because it is expecting only two values and we provided 3 this time, and hence the error. What if we provide only single value or lesser value than the number of variables? So let's say I provide 1. Again, the same error, value error, but this time the message is not enough values to unpack. Expected 2, got 1. So it is expecting two values and we provided only one value, and hence the error. Let's try to provide numbers with spaces. Let's say 1, space 2, space 3. Again, the same error. Too many values to unpack, because if you really see what is happening over here is every input that I provide is given to the one of the variable. So as soon as I press 1, that 1 is given to number. When I press space, that space is given to number 2, and then we have 2 space and 3 hanging, which is more than 2 values that I have provided, and hence the error. Now let's provide only one value and a space. See, it has print 1, and on the next line there is a blank because the space is given to number 2. So space is anyways is not going to be visible inside this terminal if there is no character available, and hence we don't see anything. From this, it is clear that we cannot ask user to enter multiple values using a single input function. We have to call it multiple times. If the values that we are expecting are 2, we need to call input function twice for each of the value to be entered. So here we saw how to use an input function and get the input from the user, assign it to a variable, convert the values taken from the input function into a desired type, and then give it to a variable and perform the operation. Okay, so the input function is the inbuilt function provided by the Python. You do not have to do anything else. It is as simple as calling that input function inside your program and assigning the values to some variable.